Good morning, everybody. We'll just wait for a few attendees to join. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. Got lots of different people coming in from lots of different places. Just to kind of kick us off, if you feel like you want to drop in the chat where you're, viewing from, what company you're with, we can kind of get the chat pretty active and have some questions and keep this very open-ended and flowing today. I think we can kind of get started with a little bit of an intro. Really appreciate everybody joining today. My name is Eddie Bakey. I'm the VP of Revenue here at Flinks. And I'll be moderating the conversation today between Flinks and Resistant AI, a startup developing advanced solutions for document forensics and transaction analysis. Fraud is no new term for anyone joining, and obviously the fraudsters have leveled up their game over the past few years. And the truth is, with AI, it's not slowing down. Forgeries, manipulated statements, synthetic identities, and the traditional way of detecting fraud just doesn't cut it anymore. So today I'm really excited to be joined by Jan from Resistant AI and Eric from Flinks, allowing the experts to kind of tell us what document fraud is today, how it's threatening financial institutions and lenders, and kind of what to look for and how to utilize AI to fight against it. So Jan, Eric, really appreciate you guys joining today, and looking forward to the conversation.
Hey, Eddie. Thanks for such a lovely introduction. So I assume we're good to go, or what do you think?
We're good to go. Why don't we kick it off and we'll look at today's agenda. Jan, if you don't mind going to the next screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Jan is a serious researcher and expert within the fraud space at Resistant AI. So he's going to be mainly walking us through kind of the fraudster archetypes, what is serial fraud, template farms, and kind of what to do in the Gen AI landscape of fraud today. And then we're going to leave you with some tidbits on how you can actively fight fraud in 2025. And Jan, I guess to set the stage and really start the conversation, as I've mentioned already, AI has clearly accelerated the arms race in fraud, if you will. Recent reports show that document-related fraud is up 300% year over year. Is there anything that you can hit on, like specific advancements you're seeing fraudsters use today, or one or two that weren't on the radar a couple of years ago?
Thanks, definitely. I think that's a good thing to start with. I think there's sort of two main phenomena or challenges that we've been observing in the document fraud landscape over the last couple of years. And besides the Gen AI one, which you just mentioned, I think it's mainly the sort of tension between automation and potential for fraud that it creates, right? The emphasis on automation of processes, whether that's onboarding, underwriting, KYC, this is increasingly getting faster, right? But with that, unless we have the right checks and balances in place to, in our case, verify documentation properly, you can also be opening a serious sort of space for fraudsters to exploit. One of my colleagues' favorite catchphrases is that if you're not automating with the right approach, you're automating fraud, right? So I think that's one of the first thing we've been observing, where serial fraudsters, something that we're going to talk about a bit more later on, are definitely leveraging some vulnerabilities that are in these systems when it comes to automation. And the second one you've just mentioned is not just Gen AI, of course, but it's the sort of overall, I would say, almost to a degree, democratization of the fake document generation, because what used to take serious skills and advanced tools to do proper forgeries, right, is now way more accessible, and it applies both to the template farms phenomena that I'm going to mention, or something that we're going to talk about, but also the Gen AI, right? So the sort of palette of tools or spaces you can look into to either obtain templates or generate convincing documents quickly is also expanding. So I think those are the two most prominent ones we've been seeing.
Yeah, and I think that leads into a great segue for you, Eric, because obviously you see firsthand how financial institutions and lenders are modernizing their fraud strategies. In your view today, kind of what's broken about the traditional way that lenders or FIs handle document verification today?
Yeah, thanks, Eddie. That's a great question. I talked to a lot of lenders and financial institutions on this, and I would say there's two topics. Number one, either you don't deal with it at all, as you kind of automate and try to scale, and you hope for the best, which is not a great approach. Or B, you're trying to deal with it, but you're dealing it in a non-scalable manner. I think you alluded to that as well, John. That's kind of the main problems that we're seeing. It might work in the past. You have a few underwriters. Maybe you're processing a few dozen documents a month, and you can kind of get by having some expert human forensics, let's say, to do those underwritings. But everyone I talk to, all of their goals are about automating their processes, or at least taking steps towards that. And you can't really do that if you in a scalable manner if you're not using the good digital solutions to actually fight that fraud. Those are some of the main things that I keep hearing.
Yeah, and I think, in my conversations as well, it's impossible to catch all the fraud with an individual now. So I think that, kind of elevates why we're having this discussion today, because the naked eye is not able to catch fraud, or the types of fraud that we see today. With that, Jan, why don't we kind of dive into the fraudster archetypes, and you can walk us through, the 4 different types and kind of what they're doing today and how we should be watching out for them.
Sure, and thanks for the transition. I think it's a good thing to start with, because really, understanding what is the threat, like what are we facing, I think is essential, obviously, to moving on to the next step of fighting it, right? And we basically have, these 4 archetypes I'm going to mention, starting with the lowest sort of level of sophistication, right? And this is the one that you're seeing right here. We call it the lazy one, right? This to a degree seems, I think, to many risk professionals out there or fraud professionals that are maybe listening right now, this might seem almost comical, right? Like, how could such a modification, clear physical modification of a payment card, bypass some systems? Well, actually, it can. We've seen this in real life that, if you have a system that focuses specifically on the digits and not necessarily on the structure of the entire image or the document, it might miss something like that. So I always use this example to illustrate that even the sort of most amateurish fraudster archetype still might be in use today, and still might even be successful sometimes, even though, of course, we're trying to limit that as much as possible. So this is the first one. Progressively speaking, we move to the next one. This is something that we like to call the amateur hour. So you can already see that the level of sophistication is slightly increased. It's still a physical modification of an image, but you can see some attempt to sort of match the fonts of the digits or even the background, even though it's clearly, obviously visible by the naked eye here. But it shows the kind of modification you would expect from an amateur, right? It's probably put hastily together. It's not refined. But then again, even as with the previous one, even the amateur might be able to bypass some verifications. So those are the 2 types that are, less sophisticated. But if we move on to the other one, this one we call the editor, right? And this is where things start to get really interesting, right? Because suddenly you have a fraudster archetype or a fraudster that essentially uses any of the many number of available PDF editors or PDF editing tools to edit the content, right? So this is going to probably match the fonts, the visual elements, right? This is not going to be suddenly detectable by the naked eye. And you need to look at other things, that other types of information that the PDF contains to be able to tell, well, is this really trustworthy or not? And the key point to mention here, of course, is that this is also not expensive, right, or hard to obtain. What is hard to obtain in this case, or what might be hard to obtain, is the template, the sort of base to start with. But once you have that PDF to edit, you can use any of number of editors that are out there. And the thing about the editor, I think in this type, this might be an archetype that is more sort of isolated, might be more of a single instance first-party fraudster, which is obviously high relevant, but maybe not as dangerous overall, unless we have millions of first-party fraudsters, which is something we're also going to talk about later. But it directly brings us to the last archetype, and I think the ones we're clearly most concerned with, and that's something we call the farmer. This is essentially a version of the editor, if we could call it that, but one that is much more sophisticated, that has a number of templates at their disposal, and more so, the farmer turns any single template into a number of more fake documents. If you look at the free examples you see on the screen there, all of these documents originated with the same template, right? So there was one template at the beginning, and by quickly changing the logos, some of the details, maybe even giving it that real life image look, you can quickly turn one template into numerous fake documents. And that's sort of the problem that creates the potential for serial fraud, and that's why we started the threat intelligence unit in the first place, to monitor, to better understand how the fake document market looks like, because it definitely keeps on producing and offering hundreds of thousands of templates like this. So this brings us to our first, I think, poll question, because we just outlined the first 4 archetypes, and we would be very curious, which of these archetypes are you guys most concerned with?
We'll leave the poll up for about 10-15 seconds here, and we can kind of go back into the answers in a little bit. As we're voting here, I think we know that nearly 70% of document fraud goes undetected in the manual review process. I'm no chief risk officer or fraudster, but I could definitely tell on the first 2 types, the lazy one and the amateur hour, that what's editable. But for me, the editor and the farmer, I obviously can't tell what the difference is. And so, Eric, as you're thinking about how some of Flinks or Resistant AI customers are looking at it, they might think, yeah, well, we can look at the lazy one or the amateur one, but how do we really ingrain that within the experience to make sure that the customer experience exists in a way that's seamless, fast, and secure, while keeping fraud out at the same time?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eddie. I mean, I think most people are aware that Flinks is in the bank aggregation space or bank linking space, and when we started offering document processing as well as part of our solutions, we wanted it to be on the same level of trust that someone is directly linking their bank account. So having that clear verdict and saying, this is something that you can review, or like we've seen that this has been edited in, like opening I Love PDF, or some of the suspicious use of PDF editors, like having that reassurance, even if you're, I think we'll get into it, but even if you are an expert forensic and kind of can see it, just getting that, even if you're just getting that extra consolidation and seeing, okay, I can actually review that. So I think you're going to go into this, John, but the more sophisticated fraud, be able to detect that if you're doing manual review, but even the easy fraud, like you say, if the goal is to automate and you don't care about this at all, that will also slip through. So you should be able to upfront have that confidence. And I think just last point on that is it all ties back to the end user experience, because if you need to create friction in the process or creating long kind of review process because of the reviews that you need to do to weed out fraud, it creates a bad user experience for everyone. So it's also about that speed and having something that you can quickly decide on, and focusing on the one that are really the hard cases.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads perfectly into our next section, which is the serial fraud, which is basically automating at mass scale. So before we dive in, maybe we can pull up the results from the poll question to see where we're at. And yeah, overwhelmingly, the most concerned is the farmer. Jan, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you at all from what you're seeing in your research.
I mean, not at all, but I'm also obviously happy to see that this kind of threat is being clearly reflected by the audience, right? Because even though we try to bang the drum on this issue, or have tried to do so for a while, obviously part of me still hopes that or thinks we need to do more, right? So it's good to see that this message is getting through somewhat, And as you mentioned, this leads us right into the issue of serial fraud, right? So what does this term actually mean? Well, it very much relates to the last archetype, the farmer, right? serial fraud is essentially an organized activity that's turning one template or a series of templates, right? But it focuses on generating a large volume of fake documents, because if you obviously find that weakness in any of the systems you're trying to attack, if you're successful with one document, chances are you're going to replicate that success, right? And if you're able to generate thousands of documents in a very short time, you can sort of flood the gates or flood the systems, counting on the fact that at least some percentage of those will get through, if not all, right? And this happens all very fast. I think one aspect of serial fraud that always needs to be sort of reiterated is that, most of the attacks of the serial fraud attacks we keep seeing happen either in a span of, let's say, 24 hours to a week at maximum, right? So considering, the sort of real-time reaction you need these days, once that weakness has maybe been exploited by the fraudsters, you need to act quickly. You need to react as fast as possible. So in that sense, serial fraud is the biggest danger, because it can seriously impact your business very quickly. To give you maybe a couple examples of how this can look like, we can look at something like a Bank of America account statement that, again, every single instance of this document, if you would see it, would not trigger any flags because it looks as it should. It's been edited right. But only when you can connect sort of several instances or iterations of these submissions together by looking at submission characteristics and other types of data we analyze, you can actually cluster these together and point this out as a serial fraud attack. We have another example here. This one is a slightly different. This is a Moroccan business license, but this one is slightly different, because with this one you can almost see it to some degree, because you can see how the personal details are changing, but not the stamps specifically. So the visual stamps could not remain in the exact same position, right, if these were original documents. But again, you still need the technology, right? Because if there were thousands of these submissions, you probably wouldn't be able to connect these together. Even if we're looking at each manually and each in a single instance, you probably wouldn't be able to connect these together. So that's the sort of most dangerous type of activity we're looking at, and we try to analyze properly, because that's what our customers and partners appreciate. To give you an idea of how serious this can get, this is our still standing record, I think, the number of submissions based on just one template. You can see it's well over 13K. So if you that's the sort of calculations you can start doing in your head, and I use them for some of my threat intelligence articles. Even if you only have a couple of templates or 10 templates, the sort of rate of how much you can sort of scale the fraud attacks is pretty serious, and something we need to keep in mind. And that sort of brings me, right next to the second part of the agenda or of the deck, and that's the question of where do these fake document templates come from. You've already mentioned it. We've been doing the research on something we call template farms, and that's why we started the threat intelligence unit as well about a year ago. And we've been trying to collect as much data and intel on these entities as possible, and I prepared a couple of short videos to give you an idea of how a template farm can look like, right? So the video you see here is, I would say, something to illustrate how easy it is to find a farm and how such a farm can look like, right? So very quickly, through a simple Google search for any sort of bank statement template, you can actually find one of these sites. A site that will have a sort of classic product listing as any other online shop. There'll be a sort of single product view. There'll be a grid. You can look at the price. You can put stuff in a cart. It's very much, in a way, not in any way or in any form much different from regular online shopping, except you shop for fake documents. And as you can see in the end of the video, you will find hundreds and thousands of templates each, even within one website, right? And a good thing to mention here is that it doesn't just have to be a website, right? we define template farm as any kind of entity that's specializing in selling these fake documents. So it can also be a messaging channel. It can be a forum account. It can be a social media page. Obviously, the forms of how these look vary, but the website is sort of the starting point, right? And when it comes to these farms, it doesn't just have to be the classic grid-based product listing. The second video you see here now is a different type of farm. And this one we call the generator type, because this is not a static list of products you select from. This is a farm where you select what you want, you input the personal details, and the website or the tool generates the document for you. So in this example, I tried to generate a fairly simple Canadian pay stub, as that was one of the main sort of offerings, right? And so you still obviously, I guess in this case, need to think of what you're inputting this document with. But at the end of the day, it's going to look crisp. It's going to be a nice digital PDF, and it's going to cost you less than $5 or somewhere around that. So just going to wait for the video to wrap up a little bit to give you an idea, because you get a preview of how this looks like. There we go. You get a nice little pay stub. You can try something with. So these are the two main types of farms that we've been seeing. Overall, we've, over the course of around, I think, 8 to 10 months of doing this systematically, we've identified over 150 of these farms. And that's right now, that's just strictly talking about the websites. And yeah, these 150 websites sell about over 300,000 templates. And, again, because I keep talking about this frequently, is we're kind of afraid we're not really that deep in it, right? We haven't spent that much time on identifying these sites, and we've already got such a long list. If we focus on multiple languages, multiple regions, and expand the search, I think this will go up even higher, potentially significantly, depends. But even this kind of number is already pretty serious, right? We also.
The point on that, I think with regards to the 300,000 templates, we've talked a lot about bank statements today for obvious reasons. A lot of our customers use bank statements and transactional data, but these templates aren't just specific to financial institutions, right? Sorry, not specific to bank statements. We can be looking at void checks, pay stubs. So you can be sitting there thinking about how does this affect me if it's on a bank statement? Well, if you have an onboarding process for KYC, or you have a payments processing company where you need the void check to be uploaded to get the payment information, this is all part of the farms that exist today. And Eric, I think in some of the conversations you've been having, this is exactly highlights some of the problems that our customers are facing is that fraud at the beginning of the client journey.
Yeah, definitely. I can echo that. Of course, bank statements is still one of the main problem areas, especially if you're want to do underwriting, like for example, a small business and want to do cash flow underwriting, and you can modify or enhance the type of income that you have from your small business. That's very concerning, of course. But yeah, it's also like you say, it's about notice of assessments, or it can be all kinds of documents. Around this. Yeah.
And I think Sri in the comments made a great one. Rental application scams through pay stubs, like that's huge for property management firms. Sorry, Jan, you were going to say something.
Yeah. Just to quickly follow up on what you just said. Yeah, tenant screening is one of the main segments we're working with. And yeah, just to your point, I've seen hundreds of different document types for these templates. It definitely does not, by any chance, limit itself only to financial documents. There's a much wider scope, right? Of course, including IDs, but yeah, income verification, legal documents, something even as obscure, and I keep sort of repeating myself on that because I wrote in an article about it. Even something as obscure as death certificates, even for that you can find templates, which before starting to diving into this research, I didn't really know what it was, much less knowing you can buy a template for virtually any country online for pretty cheap. So yeah, the template farms, I think the goal is to attract the widest possible customer base, and of course some documents will be more popular, and I'll have some graphs for you a bit later on, but yeah, it applies to a much wider spectrum of documents.
And just one question here from the audience, and we might get into it later, Jan, but what about false positives? Is there a chance that automated systems can detect an authentic document as fraudulent? I think the answer is absolutely, and it's about kind of more how you and we at Flinks deal with those false positives, but can you touch on that for a minute?
So I think, definitely is one of the main factors that we concern ourselves with. And I think that's also something our engineers very much pride themselves on, right? Because we've consistently been, I think, able to keep the false positive rate under 1%. Maybe not in all cases. I don't have the raw data with me to confirm you on that, but I think in a general trend, that's been our goal, right? To keep this as low as possible. And yeah, I mean, that's why, when we speak about, when I mention terms like submission characteristics, or where we mention stuff like layered defense, that's when these sort of components come in, because at some point, yeah, you might need to have to properly decide, okay, was this actually fraudulent document or not, or maybe there has been some sort of process mistake on the side of submission. But yeah, I mean, false positive is definitely a thing, and again, I think that's even something I would be as confident to say as that differentiates us from some of our competition, because again, this is something that we try to limit as much as possible.
Awesome. And just for the audience, feel free to continue to ask questions. We will have some time at the end for Q&A, but if there's anything that comes to mind as we're kind of rolling through the deck, please feel free to drop it in the chat. So Jan, I think you can kind of continue with the...
Yeah, so obviously you've seen the number of farms and number of templates we have uncovered, but I think the next sort of thing that needs to be addressed is, or people have been asking us about this, is, well, how many people are actually selling this kind of stuff, right? And it's kind of hard to measure that or do a proper estimation, but we at the very least try to track the website traffic of these farms, right? And so far we've been able to come up with around 1 million plus unique visitors per month for these 150 websites. And that's already a pretty big number, right? Even if a fraction of that 1 million actually decided to commit fraud, that would still be a relevant number. And if you factor in that as far as the fake document market, not all of this activity is done through the websites, right? There's the messaging apps, there's the Discord servers, there's the internet forums, there's other means of how you can obtain that template. So that number in real world will definitely be even higher. Depends on obviously knowing how much, but I think maybe quite substantially, because I think something that we have been seeing is that a lot of this activity is being done through some of the messaging apps, for example. So that is definitely something to keep in mind of. And the next sort of continuation is, people can always be wondering about, well, okay, you talk about the template offering, but do you actually know if this is being leveraged in the real world? Well, to that we can also say yes, because a couple slides that I have prepared here, we are now using the research that we have, are now able, often or not, match the actual online listing of a template to a document that was submitted in production, right? So whether it's a Chase Bank statement like this, or the pay stub that I just shown you, generated with that stub creator, all of these examples, or maybe a Hong Kong business license that is available for purchase somewhere else, all of these examples show you that what we see being offered on the template farm side also is being used by fraudsters in the real world. So this is not just some sort of abstract game we're playing here. To give you a slight bit of a detail on the specific document types, as you and Eric mentioned, yeah, bank documents, account statements are still by far the most sort of prominent document types, especially in terms of the volume of templates available. But yeah, even stuff like utility bills or those business licenses, you will find thousands to tens of thousands of examples for each. And if you look at the average price, obviously that also varies somewhat. But even the sort of upper level of the $27 per template considering what kind of financial crime you can probably commit with this is still such a low barrier to entry into document fraud, and that's something that we definitely keep emphasizing as well. I have a little. Sorry,
just
yeah.
I was just going to touch on that because, Eric, I think a lot of our commercial lending customers require business licenses as well as bank statements. And if you're looking at this thinking, okay, I could get an application through and for $50 ish, that's quite cheap and quite a massive penalty for a business lender to pay. So as you're thinking about kind of some of the customers you've dealt with, what comes to mind in what they should be doing or thinking about as they're sitting here going, God, I got to up my processes?
Yeah, what immediately comes to mind is it's pretty easy to allocate. I would say I would definitely recommend allocating part of what you can see as an increase of this type of fraud. And then even if you're experiencing some fraud today, expect it to increase over time. So you can definitely allocate some of those losses that you expect to see from fraud in order to fight and verify. We touched upon it quickly, but I think one thing that we really like about the Resistant AI solution is not only automating, let's say, you don't have to automate necessarily all your process and take that big step, but you can automate, let's say, 90% of it and say, differentiate between like, this is a trusted document that I can quickly expedite and go through. So it's about saving money on that side, not only saving money on like detecting the fraud, but it's about saving the money also on the actual ease of application and the ease of processing, or be able to automate more of your processes. So I think there's two sides of that actually, you're able to save against this fraud.
Yeah, I think a good point, because you look at fraud as the loss. And so obviously, what are your fraud losses and how much did that cost you? But Deloitte did a study earlier in the year on the future of fraud, and they noticed that 50% of financial services firms plan to increase their fraud prevention budgets by more than 25%. So in order to fight those losses, you need to invest in the tooling. And I think that is something that you have to get comfortable with, and you have to say, I'm okay to spend money up front to save money on the back end. And I'm sure, Jan, that's exactly what your customers are telling you as well.
Yeah, and I think with fraud prevention, that's always been the case to a degree, right? How much are you willing to invest now so you don't have that much higher loss later? And I thank you, Eric, for you said, because I think, yes, the efficiency of processes, the speed with which you're able to sometimes escalate cases, right? That is very important, and definitely, working with several lenders, that is something that we've been able to help with tremendously, right? Not only the detection itself, but also the sort of logic behind how a case is handled as well. I wanted to quickly follow up with those slides because there's a couple more I want to go through. If you look at some of the more document types, we're going to try to make this a little quicker because we want to have some time for the Q&A. Yeah, you can see different types of document types, with respect to volume and price. The key message here is, as I think I've already said to a degree, even at the higher level, the average price is still going to be quite low. Hence the low barrier to entry. If you think that this just might be limited to one region, it's not. We've seen templates for basically any world country. I've even been asked stuff as like, have you seen templates for North Korea? Yes, I have. It's not out of question when it comes, I think, to template farmers. The term that I like to use is that farmers definitely do not discriminate based on region or document type. They're happy to accommodate everybody. If we look at Canada and US specifically, these are number 1 and number 5 of countries with the most templates listed to date. I think for quite obvious reasons, the size of economy, the number of financial institutions operating in those countries. Obviously, the US is still significantly higher in terms of total volume of templates. Even though Canada's number 5, it has much less templates to a degree, but still quite a lot. I've also looked at, if you look at the sort of document issuer numbers, so how many companies from these countries whose documents are actually being imitated. For Canada, we've already identified more than almost 300 different companies whose documents are being templatized. For the US, it's over 5,000 companies. So even the spectrum of, if you're thinking, well, it doesn't maybe concern my business, this sort of travels across segments and regions. So it doesn't just concern financial institutions. There's utility companies, there's insurance companies, there's all kinds of different segments we could relate this to. So that's sort of the illustration of how big this is, the fake document market is, and it essentially relates to everybody. Two more important lessons we have uncovered in our threat intelligence research. One is that this is a huge interconnected ecosystem. What that means is that an organized crime group can of course run more than just a single farm. It would actually by now be my expectation that if you're serious about this on the farmer side, you're operating more websites than just one. And we see how some of these farms are connected together, which connects us to the second main lesson, which is these farms are essentially unkillable. I've had that question before of like, are you contacting law enforcement? Why are these fake document selling farms not being taken down? I think you can really, because they're so used to either moving the domains, and as you can see in the picture here, how one farm moves from one domain to the other periodically, and you can set up servers, VPNs. Basically, you can operate your farm website from one corner of the world and having the server set up in the other. So when this kind of thing is definitely not going away, farms are here to stay. I think we can actually, unfortunately, only expect there to be more farms as time goes on, because it's very easy to some degree replicate once you have the sort of underlying components in place, such as a template database, you can quickly set up a website selling all of these, right? So that's the sort of main intel we've been able to gather on the template farms, and I think, considering the time, it's time we get to the next hot thing, right? That's been circulating lately, and that's the Gen AI.
I do want to be conscious of time here. We do have 8 minutes left, but Daniel actually just asked a question related to AI generation of fake documents. So why don't we go to the next slide, and we'll launch the poll right away. How prepared are you to detect AI-generated fraud as an organization? I think, Daniel, your question is, how do you 100% confirm that a document is fake? Do you think generative AI will get so good that your AI will not be able to detect that it's fake? And I think it's the cat and mouse game, Jan, that we've talked about, and fraudsters have been playing for decades or centuries even, where technology gets better, fraudsters get better, and it's kind of going back and forth. So with regards to this question, how prepared are you? Are you completely prepared, completely unprepared? We'll kind of look at those results in a second. But going back to Daniel's question, where do you stand on how good AI is at fighting AI?
That's a good question, because I think, and then maybe you can show the poll results a couple seconds later. I'm just going to switch to the next slide here, because that, I think, nicely illustrates this. I think it's still not there as far as generating the perfect fake, or generating something that would not be detectable either by the naked eye or the technology. That's still not happening, right? If you look at the example here, this is images of two Chase Bank statements we've tried to generate with AI. The latter one is, I think, from last year, and the recent one is one that I've compiled in the last few days, right? And you can clearly, I think, very early on, you can see the sort of leap that has been made in terms of how much does this even look semi-realistic, right? The image on the left, clearly weird sort of layout component. Even the name of the bank is spelled out wrong. But with the one on the right, you quickly move into something that, especially from a sort of like a helicopter view look, maybe okay-ish. If you really zoom in, obviously you would still see some clear inconsistencies and typos and stuff like that. But on the overall, that is the sort of leap that has been made, right, in the recent weeks. But I like to stay on the side of sort of being realistic, right? I think you can do a lot of fear mongering with the Gen AI, but I, on the contrary, like to make the point that we're kind of prepared for this. This is, we have been developing detectors not just for Gen AI documents, but all sorts of stuff for years now, and we have hundreds of detectors on hand, and we'll keep developing more. So I think, as you mentioned, it's always going to be that cat and mouse game, but I think we're quite ready for it, even with the new development. Right?
Yeah, and I think based on everything that our users have seen, or our attendees have seen today, if we can launch the results of that poll, I think it'll be very, very telling. So we have some people that need to think about, or we're going to leave them with a lot to think about, Jan and Eric, with regards to how they can prepare for the detecting AI fraud. Just to be wary of time, maybe we can jump to, through the next couple slides quickly here and get some more questions from the audience. We do have one.
Yeah, definitely.
We do have one that's actually quite relevant. We've heard this a few times from Dustin. And with regards to false positives, we often see risk flags associated with when an end user is using a print to PDF. So it could be a legitimate bank statement, but they're downloading it and printing it to a PDF. How does resistant AI distinguish between a legitimate document with a document generation issue or a fraudulent document user trying to hide/layer their fraud?
Sorry, I need to look at that question again because it's quite long.
I think the idea is like, how do you determine if it's, if you downloaded the document from a PDF from your bank statement and it's getting, flagged as fraud, how are we making sure that, those false positives are dealt with? I think you said under 1% false positive rate. So clearly resistant AI is doing a great job at that. Is there any tips that you have for them?
So I think I'm not sure. So
I'm a bit familiar with this question also.
I'm a bit puzzled by the question. So what would be a legitimate generation of a document using AI?
I have a little bit of background on this, John. So it's typically
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So typically what this happens is sometimes the user, if you're downloading directly from your bank's institution and clicking download, you're saving all that good metadata and you're going to return a trusted document. But there are cases where, for it's still legitimate reason, but instead of clicking download, they're clicking print and then clicking save as a PDF. And that causes, it to look like it was open in PDFium, or, it creates some false positive. So I think the general recommendation is to try to educate everyone when you're sharing documents to always not alter it throughout. But yeah, I guess the question is also deeper around that. If, going forward, if, is there anything resistant AI to do today or in the future to help kind of distinguish, accidents versus real layered fraud. Yeah.
I mean, as far as I know, we routinely review, some of these specific cases of our clients. So if there's something obviously that maybe puzzles you, that kind of stuff always gets resolved pretty quickly. But as you mentioned, I think it's also has to do a lot with the sort of document submission / processing hygiene, right? You wanna sort of establish the right habits because they will make your work so much easier.
So I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I think best for us to kind of continue to go through. But really, if you guys could leave our audience with, what does this all mean for fraud detection and prevention in 2025? Like, what is your suggestion? I think we all agree that the era of catching fraud manually is completely over. I think Jan demonstrated that tenfold today. So Eric, from your perspective, what does this mean, and how can the attendees leave today with actionable insights to kind of level up their game internally?
Yeah, all I would say is, and I think the serial fraud speaks to this, like you don't have to fight this alone. We can leverage, all the capabilities that, that both Flinks have and Resistant AI has, and what we can kind of do together in order to combat this fraud. So yeah, I would say like that's my main takeaway is, this is an ever evolving field. We need, So I mean, don't be a stranger, reach out, and that's my kind of key takeaway. You have to partner in order to do this, or like if you want to scale your business, I would say this is the best approach to do it. You have to kind of find the right partners to help you fight the fraud.
And Jan?
And I think for me, just to sort of pile on what Eric just said, I think, don't be scared to talk to us and explore possibilities, because I think the beauty of our solution and yours as well is the adaptability, right? I think the first, of course, step is knowing yourself, right? What is sort of how does your business look? What's your risk appetite? How do you handle document processing? Once you know the answers to those questions, or we can find these together, I think we're very much capable of tailoring our solution to whatever fits your needs, right? So it doesn't just apply to large corporations or one segment. I think in that sense, that's both of our solutions, and the partnership is very sort of flexible on that front. So my main takeaway would be, uh, uh, if you really want to solve this issue, like don't be scared to have that conversation, even if maybe nothing comes out of it, but you definitely learn more about how you handle documents and what you can do about it.
Yeah, perfect. And I think I say the same as both of you, but my point would be invest now so you can save later in the future. If you need to go get budget, you should fight for it. And this presentation should be the exact reason why. Jan and Eric and everybody that joined today, we really appreciate your time. We know 45 minutes on a Thursday is very valuable. If we can be of any assistance, please feel free to reach out to any of the three of us, connect with us on LinkedIn. Again, thank you so much and have a great day.